Welcome to S28's webinar titled Streamline Your Microsoft Dynamics Database Through Archiving. Today's presenters are Mark Hebert and Arti Borker. Mark joined S28 in December 2008 as its first Chief Operating Officer. From 2006 to 2008, he was the first Chief Marketing Officer for Virtusa Corporation, a publicly traded IT services firm. He has 35 years of management experience in the software industry. Arti is the Program Director of Product Management for InfoSphere Optim, IBM's governance portfolio. She is responsible for product roadmap, strategy, and long-term vision of the portfolio and its integration across the IBM and partner ecosystem. We will be emailing a link to the recorded webinar to all that registered. Thank you, Mark and Arti, for presenting, and I'll turn the webinar over to you now.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces attending with us today. Hi, Chuck. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We've got a short and sweet pitch today to talk about with a specific focus on Microsoft Dynamics. I want to talk a little bit about the reason we think that the Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem is a particularly interesting one for the production database challenges today. So we'll talk a few minutes about that. Arti is going to then talk a little bit about some of the best practices in information lifecycle governance. IBM has a particular interest and focus in this area, and I think really has a leadership position. And so she'll give some of her insights into that way of thinking. And then we'll wrap up with the specific approach that we take for solving this problem using our services and the IBM Optim family of products. Okay, let me get into the specific market environment that we think is particularly interesting today. Microsoft has become, I think, somewhat quietly the #3 application provider in the industry. Through a family of products it has built and acquired over the years called Microsoft Dynamics. They represent some low-end applications, but increasingly some higher-end, higher volume applications that are run that large companies run their ERPs with, including Microsoft Dynamics CRM, the old Navision product called Dynamics NAV, Great Plains, and then some of the lower-end products as well. What we are seeing with this family of products is that they've reached a maturity level in many companies, not just small businesses, but good-sized, mid-market companies as well. And these products are here to stay, and they have now been in operation for quite a long period of time. It's not unusual to have a Microsoft Dynamics production database with 10 years of data or more. And the effect of building that kind of transaction data over the years, we sort of like to think of this as cholesterol slowly building in your production systems. The idea here is that the more data you acquire, typically data older than 18 to 24 months is hardly ever accessed, but if it's sitting in production databases, it has an impact on performance. These are all in relational databases of various kinds, and it's very easy with relational databases to accidentally or inadvertently pass through that data in your queries and reports, and the effect of that data being there tends to gradually slow down performance. And that affects SLAs, and it affects the ability of users to get their jobs done productively. And ultimately, it also costs a lot of money to add additional storage and CPU to keep those applications running. In addition, we see that customers who've been running these applications for some time inevitably face upgrades or retirements and replacements. And all of those have are impacted in the same way by this cholesterol effect. If you're facing an upgrade, typically then you have to figure out what to do with all of that data that's no longer necessarily needed in production. So if you've got 10 years of data and you only really need the balances going forward and maybe 18 months of production data in production, what do you do with that excess? And if so, you know, one of the simplest approach is just migrate it all. But if you do that, then you're extending test cycles. It adds risk to your project. Sometimes your batch windows get threatened, and inevitably, you know, older data ends up being lower quality data that requires a master data management approach. And then lastly, the whole opportunity set associated with retiring applications presents another challenge. And what we see with many customers and companies that are in acquisition mode is that they acquire multiple production databases over time. Some of them are retired but still kept around because the data is still needed for various audit purposes, you know, for many years, or tax purposes or liability purposes. But that data still requires databases and hardware to be maintained. It can be costly, and there's a real opportunity for IT organizations to save money by retiring those applications, still keeping the data available. And so this idea of a corporate archive repository as a new corporate asset has evolved, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's the overall milieu. The common approach to dealing with all of those problems is archiving. And it turns out that traditionally vendors like Microsoft and Oracle and SAP have not been particularly interested in solving this problem for their customers. They're much more interested in having the data go into their databases rather than pulling it out. And so customers oftentimes are on their own with this problem. And fortunately, there is a growing market of solutions that deal with enterprise data management. And the opportunity here is to take data that you no longer need in production, move it into a non-production repository. I'm calling it a corporate archive repository, in a common format across applications, be able to access it with your favorite report writer, whatever that might be, and have that data be available for business purposes as well as regulatory purposes and legal. And we'll talk a little bit more about those things as we finish, get into the rest of this discussion. And the effect of all that is to be able to save hardware and labor resources, and even more so, guarantee SLAs, service level agreements. So that's the approach that we're taking here. And this fits into a little bit broader context that I wanted to highlight, this theme of information lifecycle governance. And I'll turn it over to Artie, who's one of the thought leaders at IBM in this area.
Thanks, Mark. So when I look at what customers are facing around this space, it's generally three key areas of concern, and they vary for the CIO's office versus the legal office. The first two around cost and application performance are fairly well understood in the market. The cost of buying storage, for example, is not the same as cost of owning storage, which is multiple times larger than just the cost of the acquisition of the storage system. And historically, if a customer looks at their trends around storage acquisition, their overall costs are exponentially increasing if they look at the total cost of ownership. The second problem here is around performance. Any application after a prolonged period of time starts suffering performance issues, and most of that is due to the volume of data that they have. And it doesn't need to be large volumes. If the volume is twice or three times what the application was designed with in mind, that is an explosive volume. And it could just be, you know, a few gigabytes or hundreds of gigabytes. It'll still be a problem. And if a customer really looks at what they're using in the application, it tends to be the last 12, maybe 18 months of data. Data older than that is just there. It's not being consumed for decision making. So it doesn't need to be in those systems, as it does impact performance. But the main reason they keep it is the third aspect, which is around risk and compliance. And as I travel through the world and talk to customers in various different countries, as well as all the various different industries. This is not industry specific. Every country and every industry has its own set of laws on the type of data and the length of time that data needs to be kept within the company. Over the last few years, legally, a customer is required, or an enterprise is required, to provide this data to a legal entity if subpoenaed in a court case. And this is structured data. It's not just emails and documents that we've seen in the past. So now most enterprises around the world have to keep data anywhere from 7 years to 14 years, in some cases 25 plus years. It just doesn't have to reside in their core applications. The other part of this is also being able to delete this data when the time comes, because keeping data over the time limit for too long can also be a legal issue for them. And the other part here, obviously, is being able to find that data really quickly. People don't get weeks to go hunting for this data. This data needs to be searchable very quickly. And that's one of the big areas around risk and compliance that keeps legal teams, risk management teams, even the CIO's office awake at night, because it's their responsibility to make sure that data is available when it's required. Going into the next slide, we go into a little bit more detail around what are the issues the legal team faces and the CIO's team faces. Data retention for audit, compliance, governance perspectives, and this doesn't have to be just governance for a law, it could be enterprise level governance as well, is one of the key requirements for nearly all enterprises today. And the legal team and the risk team are the ones evaluating the value of this data, how long it needs to be kept, how it needs to be provided in case of an audit or litigation, and when to delete it. All of this has to happen as seamlessly as possible. It can't be a very manual process, because we'll start making mistakes and it would take an army of people to do it. And it's the IT team's responsibility to provide the infrastructure for all of this data. And as I look at customers dealing with these aspects of retention, litigation, and defensible disposal, the one request we get more often than others, and the one that we've taken a lot of time and effort to ensure is as automatically available in our products as possible, is that they want it to happen as automatically and as seamlessly as possible with limited involvement from the development teams. All the way from being able to move the data into the archives to being able to find that data over time, to be able to retrieve that data and put it back in the original systems and delete that data as required. So seeing those patterns, I'm sure the Microsoft application customer base is facing all these issues with their data as well. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks, Arti. Yeah, I think it's especially true of small and mid-sized organizations that are hit with regulatory requirements like Arti just described, but don't have the infrastructure that big companies do to deal with them, not the legal departments, not the systems. And so the cost of servicing those regulatory requirements for those size companies is more painful. So we really appreciate the partnership we have with IBM around all this. IBM's thought leadership around information lifecycle governance, we think, has really good mind share in the industry, and it's a platform I'm going to talk about now that we have had really good success with. We are one of the top companies in the world that does archiving of applications, and we do that with IBM's platform called Optim. It's a dominant platform. It's very rare to see in our industry market shares in excess of 75%. And that's really what IBM has in terms of the archiving market worldwide, according to Gartner. We have a report from Gartner that we'll share with you after this. We'll send it out to all of you. But it's kind of the foundation of our practice. And it can be used for virtually any application, including Microsoft Dynamics applications. And the effect of that is to reduce the cholesterol, improve your performance, and reduce cost. And out of that, you get a much leaner and meaner production database during regular production time and around projects like upgrades and retirements. The platform itself has 5 key products. The number 1 product that we're focusing on this morning is the one in the lower right corner called Data Growth. Its sister product is an application retirement solution called Decommissioning. It also has a couple of solutions for non-production databases that do subsetting, which is test data management on the lower left, and masking of data, that's data privacy. And then overarching across them all is a discovery product that introspects applications for the purpose of defining the data model accurately. It's good for applications that are not well documented and maybe have a lot of customizations. So this is the platform we use, and we have done, as I mentioned, about 150 projects around this product set with a healthy number doing archiving and data growth. The hardware and software problem that we're solving here is kind of depicted in this slide that kind of shows the life cycle of data in a production database. So that curve on the bottom is growing database size. You start out with a certain level of hardware capacity, and over time, as the database grows and performance degrades, you add hardware and step functions, and that gets increasingly onerous. Even though hardware is declining in cost over time, according to Moore's law, sooner or later it starts to become real money, and at some point you start to max out on platforms, and so the effect is that you need to ultimately do something with the database itself, and that's what the archiving solution is all about. So the Optim product set, as I mentioned, has been around for about 20 years. It was acquired by IBM in 2007 from Princeton Softtech, has over 2,500 clients. That represents a dominant market share in the market. It handles a whole bunch of different use cases besides archiving that I've described this morning. We've covered those in other webinars, and we'll continue to do that in future ones. But it is part of an overall enterprise platform that we find really compelling. The key architectural components of Optim that make it compelling are, number 1, it can be used not only for Microsoft Dynamics, but for virtually any production database, distributed or legacy, on virtually any operating system and hardware environment, and actually get it started in the mainframe world. And so we use it as a corporate standard for a lot of companies, small and large, that have applications of all different types on different platforms that they need to manage through their data through the end of their life. The concept of archiving with Optim is based on a complete business object. And so the process of archiving an application is all about understanding what are the business objects that need to be archived as a whole, and defining the table relationships that comprise that business object, such that when you archive the data, it is complete. It contains not just the transactions, but also the master records and the reference data that makes it meaningful in context. So you archive in a snapshot in time for that whole business object, and then you have the ability, once it's in an archive, to manage it separately from the application itself. You can report against it, which is item number 4, universal access. You can extract it and put it into a reporting database. You can use it for managing transactions in legal liability situations, through the legal hold process. And you can also treat it as an immutable object for audit purposes, so that you can assure yourself as an organization that once that data is in an archive, it will never be changed. It can be used to meet the strictest audit and regulatory requirements. So it's a terrific platform. So that's the end of our presentation. Just want to summarize. Microsoft Dynamics customers are now reaching a maturity level where they have to start thinking about the information in those production databases as an asset with a declining value over time. such that you need to manage that data through to the end of its life. You do that by archiving data to get sort of the cholesterol effect out of your production applications. That will ensure good, ongoing, stable performance efficiently without having to add cost, and making your organization more productive on an ongoing basis. At the same time, that archive data is still available long-term according to your corporate data retention policy, according to what your audit and regulatory needs are, and with standard tools. So it's a platform you can use not only for Microsoft Dynamics, but for any other application in your portfolio, and you can use it for both archiving and retiring applications. That's the end of our preferred comments, and I'm going to stop there and open it up for questions. Mike?
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mark and Artie, for presenting. Now we'll open up the webinar to questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in the questions area of GoToWebinar, and we'll get them answered. All right. Our first question, Mark. Do you have any current clients on Dynamics AX?
We're actually just launching this practice, and so we don't have any references yet for Microsoft Dynamics AX, but we are doing the R&D for building out that solution now and looking for customers to be kind of joint partners with us in the first projects.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question, what size database is worth archiving?
Our experience is that depending on the hardware and software configuration, customers start either having performance concerns and issues or regulatory requirements with databases in the 250 gigabyte range and up. The economics get more compelling when the databases get to a terabyte or more, but you get lots of benefit from the archiving process and the kind of the compliance process you get from archiving from fairly modest-sized databases that a lot of Microsoft Dynamics customers have.
Okay, great. Thank you. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in the questions area of GoToWebinar, and we will get them answered. You can also add them into the chat section if you can't find the questions area, and we'll ask them from there as well. Next question, why use a third-party product when Microsoft offers native archiving solutions for some of them?
So obviously we've taken a look at what Microsoft offers in this area, just like we have done with Oracle and SAP in previous projects. What we're finding is that there aren't really good solutions that are proven in the marketplace today for most of these Microsoft Dynamics ERP solutions. There is a new product around AX called IDMF that Microsoft is starting to go to market with. It's still relatively unproven and not clear it's going to be as functional as we can provide with the third-party product. So we're very interested in the AX market. We're not aware of much being available with NAV and Great Plains as well. And so I think in general we think that Optim will be a competitive solution to anything Microsoft offers. And beyond that, whatever Microsoft will do will just be pertain to the individual applications and not be a platform that can handle heterogeneous apps as well. And so for other reasons, our approach is compelling.
Great, thank you. Next question, how do you handle archived data that becomes part of a legal process and must be held indefinitely?
Artie, do you want to handle that one? You covered that a little bit in your comments.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So archive, as part of the solution, the reason for using solutions like Optim is you're regularly archiving this data into a format that is set up by business objects, like Mark said. So when you're looking for data for litigation, it means you can search for this data using the software very quickly. It's just putting the name of the person who may have caused the lawsuit or the part number or something to that effect. The product allows you to pull out that piece of data and keep it separately, put a different date on it in terms of when it should be deleted. And now you've got just the right amount of data that can be sent over to the legal team. You never want to send the legal team more data than they need or less data than they need. It needs to be perfect. And so this process of being able to look for the right data, separate it out from your archive system, package it up, and send it over to the legal team is all seamlessly put as part of the software. And it's handled in that fashion. The tool also links up with software that is designed for litigation management, like the IBM Atlas software, which allows you to even link these archive pieces that have been held for a legal case with a particular litigation suit if required. So it's a fairly seamless process, and Mark's team has spent some time being able to deploy these solutions in this fashion at customers as well.
Thanks, Artie. I would add that the nice thing about Optim is that you can use it as a general tool for legal hold by using this archiving capability, going after both production data and data that's already been archived, and be able to kind of pull it out and populate it into a legal hold database, as Artie just described. So it's a great tool for managing data wherever it's located in the whole legal process.
All right, thank you. Next question, what is your licensing model and cost?
Artie, you want to handle that one?
Yeah, sure. So the variation here is from really small projects, one of a kind. It varies from that point to very large enterprise scale projects. The licensing model scales from both ends of across both ends of the spectrum, and it goes across different types of requirements that the customer may have based on the volume of data or the size of the system. So there are a lot of options for licensing the software, and it would be very specific to the problem you have. We'd be happy to get into more details around that with you if you reach out to us through the webinar.
I would add that I think the model that customers prefer these days is pricing based on the size of the production database, so the amount of data to be, the amount of data being archived.
Great, thank you very much. Looks like we have no more questions. Thank you, Mark and Artie, for presenting today during the webinar, and thank you to the attendees for attending. We've recorded the webinar, so we're going to be putting it up on S2H's website within the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll also be emailing a link out as well. So thank you, Mark and Artie, and attendees. Have a great day.